Okay. Pleasantries aside, I couldn't help, whenever you talk, especially when you talk and you start shuffling, then the panemius comes out. And I really liked your lecture. What's the matter?
Last night.
Last night. Why are you pounding on the? Oh, yes. But one thing I still have difficulty with. I understand the point that we made a commitment as a nation, but nevertheless, how can it be that a generation in past times can make an oath that's binding on us? It presents legal difficulties. It's hard to see how. Now, you may say that there's something like that, like Rosh Hashanah. So what did Hannah do? So she donated her son as a nazir to Eli. So it seems there that you could, but I don't know. Maybe that's an extraordinary circumstance or something. But in general, it's hard to. It's not that we haven't read the fine print. It's not an issue with that. It's an issue is how do you get the end of my father swore? Why is it his 10th generation descendant? Why am I bound by it? How did he have that power?
Yeah, so I mean, you cited that example. There's also the example of a father who marries off his daughter. There are examples of people who make choices about moving to some place, and they affect the destiny and the future of other people. So there's many times when we make decisions that are going to have long-term effect on the people in the next generations, even though they technically didn't choose it. But you're right. I mean that I was referencing that. I mean, I was suggesting last night that what he was doing was not binding individual people. He's binding the nation. As long as you're identified with the nation, you are subject to those agreements. That there is a way of doing covenant with the people of Israel, not with the individuals who make up the people of Israel. There's something called Klal Yisrael. And so that's the point I was trying to make, that you are not just an individual who happens to be Jewish, but you're also a limb of or a cell of a larger entity, which is called Klal Yisrael. And so all these agreements, the Torah itself, when it's telling the story, it's telling the story of the people of Israel. It's not telling the story of individuals per se. They are interesting in as much as they represent the Jewish people. But it's so. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if there's other precedents for something like this, but but that seems to be what's happening. The covenant is with the people, an entity called the people of Israel. And that entity that's called the people of Israel continues to exist. And it's the same entity. It's the same entity from the time I left Egypt until now. It's the same entity, and that seems to be how it's telling the story in general. Anyways,
yeah, okay. I guess you have to listen to it through different ears or something, but it still remains a separate problem how you can how you can make a vow that's not your vow, but it passes. I guess maybe that's you answered that. Of course, you could say that maybe that the Commonwealth idea is problematic because it leads to the conclusion that what? Okay, whatever.
You have to think about it. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's not a simple notion, but it seems to matter.
Yeah, because that would imply,
even with our own identity, it's not just a philosophical or theological or even a legal construct. It's it's also how we view ourselves.
Yes.
And
yes.
So there's times when we are asked to view ourselves not as an individual with their own narrative, but that we're part of Klal Yisrael. There are times where we go here like to talk about the problem of why the righteous suffer, or things like that. There you'll see going that, times when we end up going there for different reasons, but yeah.
Okay. Well, it was
Yeah.
it was very interesting, and it had me awake. So
Okay.
thanks a lot.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. So I'll be honest with you. I have tried, even when we weren't even on my own, to research this subject, and of compelling a Gentile to pay their loan, and nothing. I can't figure out how to search it, because every time I think I've added the right words, the wrong stuff comes up. So I figure we'll just look at the Rambam himself in his codes. So this is from the Mishnah Torah, Hilchos Malva Velova, and it says as follows: whenever a person presses a poor person for payment, when he knows that he does not have the means to repay the debt, he transgresses a negative commandment, as Exodus 22:24 states, do not act as a creditor towards him. It is by contrast a positive mitzvah to press a Gentile for payment and to cause him exasperation. As Deuteronomy 15:3 states, press a Gentile for payment. According to the oral tradition, we have learned that this is a positive commandment. All right, so now we're going to go there. Why? Because we can.
It was also according to me what we consider to be hitter mitzvah in this particular case.
All right, let's see here. Let's just see. This is of an alien thou mayest see how they translate it? Mayest exact it. Again, that's how they translate it. But this implies a positive command. So Rashi's just quoting the Sifra. So let's see what Ibn Ezra says. It is optional. Now, why would he say that? See that, Ibn Ezra? Ibn Ezra says, of a foreigner thou mayest exact it. It is optional. So even though it's a mitzvah, he's still saying it's optional. Ramban. This constitutes a positive commandment. Thus is Rashi's language quoting the Sifri. The meaning thereof is that there is a positive commandment with respect to your brother, that you are not to exact a debt from him after it was canceled by the sabbatical year. The reasoning being as follows: of an alien you can, but not from your brother, and a negative commandment derived from a positive commandment carries the force of a positive commandment. And because we have been taught there, he shall not exact it of his neighbor and his brother, it is a negative commandment upon him. Therefore the rabbis again taught, of an alien thou shalt exact it, that is a positive commandment. Not to exact the debt from a brother, meaning to say that he who exacts the debt from his brother violates both a positive commandment and a negative commandment. So you see, the Ramban seems to disagree with the Rambam. The Ramban, Nachmanides, is saying the positive commandment is not, even though it sounds like it, the positive commandment is not collecting from the Gentile. The positive commandment is when you don't collect from the Jew. even though it calls it a positive commandment, when you don't collect it, you're fulfilling a positive commandment. Of an alien thou shalt exact. This is a positive commandment. What does that mean? Not to exact the debt from a brother, meaning to say that he who exacts a debt from his brother violates both a positive commandment and a negative commandment. So
it's totally binary. Whenever you're talking about doing something to a Jew, you're also including the Gentile on the other side, not doing. I mean, or
right.
the opposite, or the opposite.
Right. But again, he's this way. He doesn't have to say that it's actually a positive commandment to
do it, to press. Yeah.
Right. According to the Rambam. So in the same way, the rabbis have said, there unto an alien thou mayest lend upon interest. It is a positive commandment. Be unto thy brother, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend interest. This is a negative commandment. This too is, as we have explained, that is the meaning of the see free. There's a positive commandment with respect to your brother, not to lend him on interest. And so did Rashi explain over there. But not that there is any commandment to lend to an alien on interest. It is so indicated from the Gemara of the chapter, what is usury. Now, Harav Moshe ben Maimon made both of them actual commandments to exact debts from an alien and to lend upon interest. He erred regarding these taught Sifrei. Such expressions are very common in the Sifrei in many places, as for example, of all clean fowls you may eat. It is a positive commandment. And all winged swarming things are unclean. They should not be. This is a negative commandment. In other words, they're not telling you to actually, that it's not a positive commandment to eat a bird. It means that when you eat an unclean bird, you have violated both a positive commandment and a negative commandment. But it doesn't mean you should go out and find a bird and eat it. Similarly, the rabbis mentioned in the Sifra and the Sifri, these are the beasts which you may eat. It is a positive commandment. Again, there's no positive mitzvah to go out and eat an animal. But the matter is clear as I've explained it. So he disagrees with the Rambam. And he says that even though this language...
I forgot my medicine in the car.
Goes there...
The car part. Where's the car part? What did you do? I just...
So again, so far we have the Ibn Ezra who said it is not, what was his language? Did he say it was voluntary? It is optional. And now we have the Ramban, who seems to be saying that it's optional, but not that it's an actual mitzvah to do it. But you do see in his language there, he was understanding it like you guys were talking about yesterday, that, because when I read the Rambam, I just thought, if you would happen to already have a loan out with him and he hasn't paid you back, it's a mitzvah for you to collect it. But he also seemed to understand that there might be some people who think there's a mitzvah to actually lend money with interest out of this. The Rambam doesn't say it though. What the Rambam said was, the Rambam says, it is by contrast a positive mitzvah to press a Gentile for payment and to cause him exasperation. Yeah, the Rambam doesn't say it's a mitzvah to lend with interest so that you can press him. It just says it's a mitzvah by contrast to press a Gentile for payment and cause him exasperation. Because again, in order for this case to be exactly parallel to the case that you're not supposed to do, we saw that would mean that, because you're allowed to ask a Jew to pay back the debt. you're just not supposed to do it when it's clear he can't. There's also, it seems like, a difference of opinion as to whether you can press him to take out a loan to pay it back. But so the contrasting case with the Gentile would be where you lent him money and you know he can't pay it back, but you're pressing him to do it anyways. That might be what he means when he says cause him exasperation, because you're pushing him to pay you back even though you know he can't. Why would that be a positive mitzvah in the Rambam's mind? So, all right, let's go back here. Let's go away from this. And let's see if they all right, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to go to the Sefer Mitzvot so we can look at the commentaries on the Rambam. So we're going to, not Sefer Mitzvot, to the Rambam Malva Velova. So far, we've seen that there are people who disagree with the Rambam, but now the question is, what was Rambam thinking? Just to clarify his position. So it's Hilchos Malva Velova. All right. Halacha. There, it used to be when you were learning in yeshiva, so there were different setups for the yeshiva. There were places that had tables, and if you had a table, you often, in a lot of these places, you sat side by side with your chavruta. But it is also, some of them had it where you sat opposite on the other side of the table. But you were encouraged to have some text there for easy reference, so you didn't have to get up and go to the library to get a text. So you were encouraged to have a small Talmud. So they either came in individual volumes, very tiny, or a couple volumes, and then you were also encouraged to have a Rambam. Those were and a Tanakh. So you'd have like a Tanakh, you'd have a Shas, and you'd have a Rambam. And so, like, if you to this day go into certain yeshivas, you will still see that setup, like in the Gush and other places. You'll still see that setup where everybody has this out, like their basic reference stuff. But the Rambam was there, and I'm assuming that would have been the case going back about 100 years. More than 100 years before that, I doubt if the feeling was you should go to the Rambam right away. There we are. We're getting close. Borrowing. That was Malva Belova, wasn't it? Borrowing and deposit? I think this has to be it. Let's see here. No. No, it's not it. Slaves, neighbors, agents, owners, property, sales, murder, one who injures a person, robbery, theft, damages, robbery, lost property, ownerless property, sales, agents, partners, slaves, borrowing and deposit. Oh, why? Chapter 1, Halacha 2. This is. Oh, there it is. Creditor and debtor. There we go. All right. Whenever a person presses a poor person for payment when he knows that he does not have the means to repay the debt, he transgresses an negative commandment. All right. Let's look at commentary. All right. So he has here in this commentary, which was Kiryat Sefer. So it says here that mitzvah 217, is not in our order, is to demand payment from a Gentile. As it says, I'm translating it, as it says, you shall demand payment from a Gentile. Orally, we learned that this is a positive commandment, as it says in the Sifri. And the explanation is that you are permitted. So, lanachri ator rishoi lingosh. You are permitted to press him, but not to your brother. And a negative commandment that comes from a positive commandment, 8, is also called a positive commandment. So he also is not explaining the Rambam. He's disagreeing with the Rambam, because he says it means uperusho shuratzalom lanochri ato rishoi lingosh. You are permitted to request. So that's a Kiryat Sefer. Now the Lechem Mishnah. Right. So first of all, this is the Lechem Mishnah, one of the commentaries on the Rambam. So it says here, Kasha, this is difficult, this mitzvah you're supposed to press the Gentile. The high crop is Shemitah Ksiv. The actual source of this verse is talking about the Shemitah, as Anachri Tigosh. Bimkain, Aseiza Eino Elabenina Shemitah. First of all, this positive commandment should really only be with regard to the Shemitah, where, in other words, that the Shemitah does not amnesty loans to Gentiles. Hu Yolif Minagisha de Shemitah Lenagisha de Alma. And the Rambam has somehow learnt from the Shemitah amnesty of loans, he's learned a general rule that imkain yehekan over benogesh Yisrael betray lave. So it would end up that after the Shemitah, if you pressed a Jew to pay for their loan, you would actually violate 2 prohibitions. One of them with a regular prohibition that it talks about when it comes to the Shemitah, asking somebody to pay you after there's been an amnesty, and the second one is the sort of indirect commandment from here: you can press a Gentile, but you shouldn't press a Jew. So וכמו שמונה רבנו שם בהלכות שמיטה, ואחרינו לאו דלא תהיה לו כנושה, ויש לומר דבשמיטה דעבד איסור רבו יעבור, אבל הוכה למה יעבור לאו דלא ייגוש, אבל נוכרי יפילו מכל שכן, כיוון דאפילו בשמיטה מצווה ליגוש, אז הנוכרי אף אגב דהווה הפקתא דמלכה, כל שכן בזמן דלקה שמיטה. Ramban zal perish Torah kosa de isle. So the Ramban, in his commentary on the Torah, seems to interpret the Rambam over here as only talking about after the Shemitah, and that's very difficult because the Rambam is not talking about Shemitah. He doesn't mention Shemitah over here. Again, the problem is the actual context for this verse is talking about Shemitah, after Shemitah. So this is a separate problem, but he doesn't get into the Rambam's understanding of pressing the Gentile. So he also,
could pressing just mean that you don't release him like you would release Jews, after Shemitah or whatever? And
if it's only talking about Shemitah,
yeah, but then
But-
generalize, right? Because
but if you apply it in general, and this is not just about, so what you would say is, after Shemitah, you're not allowed to try to collect the loan from a Jew, but you are allowed to do it from a Gentile. So that's if it's talking about Shemitah. But if it's talking about in general, so in general, you are allowed to ask a Jew to pay you back unless you see that he can't pay you. So you'd have to say that this case is that you see the Gentile can't pay you. And even so, you're supposed to push him, which sounds like from the Rambam, because the Rambam says, he used that language, like, make his life miserable kind of language. Also the Magid Mishnah, which is another one of the commentaries here, quotes the Rambam, and then he says that later commentaries explain the Sifrei to mean you can collect from a Gentile, but you're not allowed to do it from a Jew, and that this is a kind of indirect positive commandment. So none of them are trying to explain the Rambam. They're just like all talking about who disagrees, but they're none of them.
Yeah, well, the Gentile is aggravated because he sees all the Jews' loans being forgiven. He's living. These guys.
Yes, it's not easy to be a Gentile. All right. I think we gave it a good shot. There's obviously somebody out there that would have some better understanding of this. I'm talking to Mordechai Becher maybe later today. I might bring it up with him and ask him if he has any interest. He always has some interesting sources on these kind of things. So maybe I'll ask him about it. But but otherwise, he's seen the Rambam, the way he describes it seems to be an outlier on this, even though he has the simple meaning of the Midrash, the Sifrei, because it says it's a positive commandment to press a Gentile. So all the other ones explain that what it means is you're allowed to press the Gentile, but you're not allowed to press the Jew. That kind of language is another way of writing a negative commandment. It's a positive commandment
only because it's a negative commandment
about the Jew.
Yeah, about the Jew, right.
Right. And that's how they understand it. Not that it's compelling you to press a Gentile, and certainly not that it's compelling you to make a loan with interest so that you can press a Gentile. None of that. seems to be out there according to the other commentaries. And we saw the Ibn Ezra doesn't learn it like that. The Ramban doesn't learn it like that. And the Ramban just outright says the Rambam's wrong. That's all. But what did the Rambam think? That's what we want to know. All right, fine. You don't agree with him. But what do you think he thought? How do you think it played out?
Trying to get analogies. I don't know. If you're allowed to violate Shabbos to save a Jew, does that mean you cannot save a Gentile? And I guess I don't know.
Well, there really is that thinking. There really is that thinking that strictly according to halacha, you would not be able to violate Shabbos to save a Gentile. That's strictly according to the halacha, but we do. When I say strictly, in other words, in a laboratory, if with no other factors to consider,
Right.
you would not be able to do it. We do that. We do save Gentiles, but strictly speaking, you wouldn't be able to, and you'll see that language in the Gemara. There, Rav Noach Weinberg had a series of lectures that he gave at Lakewood. This was like 50 years ago, when outreach was sort of interesting to people, but kind of exotic, and Rav Noach Weinberg represented a kind of exotic being out there doing stuff. And he showed up at Lakewood and he gave a series, like a very well attended, very popular series of classes, which they still have audio of. And this was one of the questions: how would you explain this to somebody? Somebody's asking you to understand why the Torah would not allow you to save a Gentile on Shabbos. In other words, if intervention required desecration of Shabbos, again, we do it, but on the books, you're not supposed to. How would you explain that? So he suggested that the explanation is, we always think that there are three cardinal sins. In other words, there are three sins that under no circumstance can you violate them. And they are murder, adultery, and idolatry. We call them, nowadays we call them three cardinal sins. So even if somebody would say you have to die, you are not allowed to transgress them. So he was saying, really, Shabbos should be counted as the fourth. They really should say there are four. For all intents purposes, there are four. There's those three and Shabbos. It's just that with Shabbos, there is an out. And the out is that since the Jew potentially will keep future Shabboses, it's in Shabbos's interest that one Shabbos be desecrated so that many Shabboses can be celebrated. But really Shabbos also should be inviolate. Even in other words, the principle v'chai b'hem, that you should live with them, that the mitzvahs are there to accompany us in life, and that we're not supposed to die by them. That's not why you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos. That's why you're allowed to eat treif. That's why you're allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. But that's not why you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos. That does not apply to Shabbos. V'chai b'hem does not apply to Shabbos, that you shall live with them. That's the permission to transgress other things in order to live with them, but it's not the permission for Shabbos. The permission for Shabbos is, since this person is going to keep other Shabboses, it's better to violate one Shabbos so that they can keep many Shabboses. Now, then the follow-up question is, what if you know this person isn't going to keep Shabbos? What if this person is unlikely even to live very long, and we still do it under those circumstances? But that would be his kind of general path, and that's what he said in those lectures at Lakewood. All righty.
Yes, what if the Jew is putting his life in danger by violating Shabbos? Then can you save it? Never mind. It's just, you see what I mean?
See.
He's
Yeah,
a
in other words,
Mechalel Shabbos already, and
So yeah, that's another question though. Do you have to put your life in danger to save another person?
Well,
That's
in this
another
case, in this case, I'm not even saying you'd put your life in danger. I'm just saying, since with that explanation, should you save a Jew, right, who's violating Shabbos? Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's that, and there's also if they're very sick and they're not likely to live very long after, we still do it. So you could say that once we come up with a general principle, we don't distinguish, because it's very hard to make those judgments in the moment. So they have that notion with mitzvahs. But
Rabbi.
All right. So,
Rabbi, one thing. I'm sorry I came a little late today, but
you do not have to apologize, Sam.
All right. What I was going to say was, if he violates, something, and you said they want to keep him alive so he can celebrate more Shabboses, right? You know what you said?
Yeah.
And I don't think they're on the equal. Somebody does a murder, and to keep him alive, because they want him to celebrate more Shabboses, but he was a murderer.
No, that's not what they mean. No, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about to desecrate Shabbos to save somebody. So let's say you're a doctor and a Gentile is brought in to the emergency room. Are you allowed to violate Shabbos in order to save the Gentile?
Yes.
So you're saying yes, because that's what we do. But on the books, the answer is no. The answer is no. You're only allowed to save a Jew by violating Shabbos. That's on the books. Practically, we do. But on the books, if you would look at the halacha as it's presented in a kind of vacuum, the answer is you're not allowed to. Okay. So that was what he was trying to explain. He was trying to explain, how is that possible? So his explanation was, really, you shouldn't save the Jew either. In other words, the permission when it comes to Shabbos to desecrate Shabbos doesn't come from the regular permission that we have for other mitzvahs, which is b'chai b'hem, that you should live with them and not die from them. That's why that thing of b'chai b'hem is why you're allowed to eat not kosher or eat on Yom Kippur, but that's not the permission on Shabbos. That's not why you can violate Shabbos to save somebody. The reason you can violate Shabbos to save somebody is because they are going to keep other Shabboses. It's a kind of best interest of Shabbos. But otherwise, if somebody asks the question, how many cardinal sins are there? The true answer is 4. There are 4 cardinal sins, and Shabbos is one of them. There's just like a explanation. Okay. All right.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Right. Thank you, Rabbi. Of course, the guy that you save, the Mechalel Shabbos that you save, believe me, after you save him, he'll never violate Shabbos again.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. There we go.
Okay. All right. See you all, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Bye-bye.